The Galactic Council had always been confident in its power. Across the galaxy, their fleets were feared, their commands obeyed without question. For centuries, they ruled over countless alien species, enforcing their will with unchallenged authority. The idea that any one planet, especially Earth, could pose a threat was laughable to them. Earth was a tiny speck on the map of the galaxy, a blue and green planet that had barely reached the stars. The Council had dismissed humanity as primitive, unworthy of attention. But that had been a mistake, one they would come to regret. It all started with a single report from a remote outpost on the edge of Council-controlled space. A lone human ship, the Aegis, had somehow survived an attack from one of the Council's fleets. The Aegis was nothing special, just a small human vessel with outdated technology, but it had outsmarted the mighty Empire's forces. The ship had retreated into the dense asteroid field near a dying star, escaping the wrath of the Council's ships. To the Council, it was nothing more than a fluke, a mistake. They assumed the Aegis was just a lucky survivor, and the ship's crew was probably nothing more than a group of desperate, frightened humans trying to run away from the inevitable. The Council dismissed the report with little thought, laughing it off as an inconvenience. But what they didn't know was that this was just the beginning. The Aegis was not a lone survivor, it was a signal. Humanity, though small, had been quietly preparing for the moment when they would have to defend themselves. They had spent years secretly developing technology that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. The Council ignored this, of course. They were too caught up in their own arrogance to consider the possibility that a race as young as humans might possess the strength to challenge their might. Earth was not a threat. It was a curiosity. An experiment, perhaps, but certainly no danger. Then, the second report came in. This time, it wasn't just the Aegis that had survived. Several more human ships had entered the same sector, engaging the Council's forces in a brutal skirmish. The reports were unclear, but one thing was certain: the humans had fought back. And not only had they fought back, they had done it in a way that no one expected. The human ships used tactics that confused the Council's fleet commanders. They exploited weaknesses in the Empire's advanced technology, bypassing defenses that should have been impenetrable. The Council still refused to believe it. It couldn't be true. The humans had no fleet to speak of, no real military power. The attacks were minor, isolated, nothing more than a nuisance. But then came the third report. And this time, the message was different. The Council's communications officers stared in disbelief at the transmission they received. A human general, someone they hadn't even heard of, had sent a direct challenge to the Council. Earth, he declared, was no longer willing to bow to their rule. Humanity had seen enough of the Empire's cruelty, and now they were going to fight back. The Council was stunned. They had dismissed Earth for so long, never once considering that it might have the will or the capability to stand up to them. Now they were faced with the reality that a single planet had just declared war on the mightiest empire the galaxy had ever known. But even then, many on the Council were too proud to admit that they might have underestimated humanity. They believed it was a desperate move, a cry for help from a small, weak species that would soon fall in line once the true power of the Empire was shown. They were wrong. The humans had more than just weapons. They had resolve. They had a strength that no one could see coming, and it was that very strength that would change everything. The Council, with all its might, had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated the very people they thought they could control. And now, humanity's fight for survival would begin, not just for their planet, but for their place in the galaxy. The silent warning had been sent, but the Council had ignored it. Soon, they would realize that ignoring humanity's strength had been their greatest error, and that mistake would cost them everything. The human resistance rises. The Galactic Council had underestimated humanity. They had dismissed the planet Earth as insignificant and its people as primitive. Now, they were forced to confront the consequences of their negligence. The reports kept flooding in. Human ships, small and seemingly insignificant, were fighting back with an ingenuity that baffled even the most experienced military commanders in the Empire. Each skirmish, each unexpected victory, sent shockwaves throughout the Council. The Aegis was not the only ship to survive. It seemed that Earth's people had been preparing for a war they had never wanted, a war against the very beings who had thoughtlessly oppressed them. Over the course of a few short months, the humans had developed an alliance of their own, one that had spread across the galaxy faster than anyone had anticipated. The human ships were small, but they were quick and unpredictable. Unlike the mighty fleets of the Galactic Empire, which relied on overwhelming power and sheer numbers, the humans fought with strategy and cunning. Their ships were agile, designed for maneuverability rather than brute strength. They used unconventional tactics, exploiting weaknesses in the Empire's seemingly impenetrable technology. The humans' understanding of their own weaknesses made them masters of surprise. The Council's fleets had always relied on superior firepower, and yet, in every engagement, the humans seemed to anticipate their moves. They used makeshift weaponry, salvaged from decades of conflict and poverty, but they worked. Every shot fired, every move made, was calculated to give them an edge. What had once been a disadvantage had now become their strength. On the surface, it seemed like chaos. The Galactic Empire, known for its advanced technology and military might, was being challenged by a few scattered, resourceful human ships. But the resistance was organized, and it wasn't just the ships that were taking the fight to the Empire. Earth's colonies, which had once been left to their own devices, had risen up in defense of their homeworld. The Galactic Council, with all its vast resources and power, struggled to understand what was happening. How had humanity, a species they had always considered inferior, managed to orchestrate such a massive rebellion? What was it about Earth that had given its people the courage to stand up to an empire that had crushed entire civilizations in the past? Back on Earth, the story was different. The humans, though small in number compared to the great empires of the galaxy, had long known the hardships of survival. They had learned to adapt, to innovate, to persevere. When the Galactic Empire first arrived on their planet, they had done so with the intention of subjugating and controlling Earth's resources. But humanity had not folded under pressure. Instead, they had spent every moment preparing for the day they would fight back. Earth's leaders, once considered mere dreamers, had created an underground network of warriors, scientists, and strategists. They had spent years developing technology that could rival the Empire's, focusing on finding weaknesses in the Council's advanced weapons and defense systems. They had studied the Empire's tactics, learned from their mistakes, and patiently awaited the right moment to strike. The time for patience was over. The Council's warning had been ignored, and now the full force of humanity's wrath was being unleashed upon them. Earth's people had no choice but to fight for their survival, and in that fight, they would rely on the most powerful weapon they had, their unity. Across the galaxy, colonies of humans had been quietly organizing, preparing for the day their homeworld would call upon them. And now, the day had come. It wasn't just Earth that was at war. It was every human colony, every group of humans spread across the stars, united in a common cause. The Galactic Council had no idea what they had unleashed. They had thought that by controlling Earth, they could easily dominate humanity. Instead, they had unknowingly awakened a sleeping giant. Now the fight for the galaxy had begun, and there would be no turning back. As the first wave of human resistance fleets engaged the Council's forces, the Council's leaders watched in disbelief. They had never seen anything like this before. The humans were relentless, showing no signs of backing down. And the Council was beginning to realize that this war was not going to be won with brute strength alone. The battle for the future of the galaxy was just beginning, and Earth, once considered weak, was proving to be the most formidable adversary the Council had ever faced. The Galactic Council's panic. As the human resistance continued to grow stronger, panic began to ripple through the Galactic Council. The once unified front of the Empire began to show cracks. Advisors and military leaders scrambled to find answers, but nothing made sense. How could this be happening? The human forces were outmatched in terms of numbers, technology, and resources, and yet the humans were winning, one battle at a time. In the heart of the Galactic Council's Central Command, leaders convened in a tense war room meeting. Holoscreens flickered with real-time data, showing the progress of human ships across multiple fronts. The human vessels, though vastly outnumbered by the Empire's fleets, seemed to predict their every move. What should have been small skirmishes were becoming decisive victories. Their unconventional tactics were leaving the Empire's commanders bewildered. "Prepare a full-scale retaliation," Commander Vrax ordered, slamming his fist onto the control panel in frustration. His deep voice was thick with anger, but even he was beginning to feel the weight of doubt. His fleet, known for its ability to crush entire civilizations, was now being outmaneuvered by a species the Council had once dismissed as insignificant. The Council's most powerful fleet, the Dominion fleet, had been sent to crush Earth's defenses once and for all. Yet, what should have been a routine operation had turned into a nightmare. The humans weren't fighting back like the Council expected. They were using guerrilla tactics, exploiting every weakness, and even sabotaging the Empire's own systems. It was as if the humans had anticipated every move the Empire made. And that wasn't all. Every time the Council thought they had cornered the humans, they would disappear into the depths of space, leaving the Empire's forces disoriented and confused. It wasn't just their combat prowess that stunned the Council, it was their resilience. The human spirit, it seemed, was indomitable. "This is absurd," General Kale said, his voice laced with disbelief. "We have the largest fleet in the galaxy, the most advanced technology, and we're being bested by these humans? How are they doing it?" "No one knows," Vrax muttered, staring at the holoscreen, which now showed a red mark representing the loss of a key Imperial ship to the humans. "It's as if they've been preparing for this. We never expected them to have such a spirit. We've always ruled with power, but they fight with something we cannot comprehend. Perhaps they have learned more from their ancient wars than we assumed," Kale suggested. "The humans have a history of resistance. Perhaps this was their final test, the moment when they learned to fight on a galactic scale." The Council had underestimated Earth's history, thinking of it only as a planet full of primitive creatures and short-lived conflicts. But Earth's legacy was one of survival. From the early days of humanity's existence, they had faced war, plague, famine, and internal strife. Each battle, each hardship had made them stronger. The lessons of their past, it seemed, had come full circle. The Council had relied on their enormous fleet, their superior technology, and their ability to control resources. But the humans fought not just for survival, they fought for something far more dangerous. They fought for freedom, for the preservation of their identity, and for the chance to stand against the seemingly unstoppable force that the Galactic Empire represented. And that was what terrified the Galactic Council the most. The humans' tenacity was something the Council had never encountered. It was more than just courage. It was something deeper. Their refusal to surrender, even in the face of overwhelming odds, was forcing the Council to rethink their entire strategy. The idea of total domination was no longer a certainty. For the first time, the Galactic Council was faced with the reality that they might not win this war. The human resistance wasn't just about military tactics. It was a statement to the galaxy that the Earth and its people could never be ruled. The message was clear. Humans would fight to the last, no matter the cost. Back on Earth, the human leaders were already planning the next phase. They knew the Council would retaliate with overwhelming force, but they were ready. This wasn't just a war for survival anymore. This was a war to send a message to the entire galaxy. And the message was loud and clear. Earth would never bend to the will of the Galactic Empire. As the first phase of the war continued, the Empire's forces began to realize the truth. The humans were more than a nuisance. They were a threat. and they were ready to take the fight to the next level. The Council had made a critical mistake. They had underestimated humanity. Now, it was too late to turn back. The war was escalating, and there was no telling how far the humans were willing to go to defend their freedom. The real question was, could the Empire stop them before it was too late? The turning point. The Galactic Council's panic only deepened as Earth's resistance grew bolder. The human forces, once scattered and uncoordinated, had become a formidable and well-organized threat. What had begun as an unpredictable uprising was now a coordinated military campaign that left the Empire in chaos. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Empire found itself on the defensive. The once proud fleets of the Empire, known for their strength and invincibility, were being shattered by human ingenuity and determination. Earth's technology, although not as advanced as the Empire's, was rapidly evolving. Every battle taught the humans something new, and they adapted quickly. The humans' most significant advantage, however, was something the Empire could never understand. It wasn't their weapons or their ships, but their unbreakable will to survive. The more the Empire attacked, the harder the humans fought back. They weren't simply fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for their very existence. On the Imperial capital, high-ranking officials gathered once again, this time in a rare emergency meeting called by the Galactic Emperor himself. The mood was somber, and for the first time, the Emperor's expression reflected something beyond arrogance: fear. The once untouchable power of the Empire was being threatened, and there seemed to be no clear way to stop the humans. "They're adapting faster than we expected," said Admiral Wraith, one of the Empire's most experienced commanders. His voice was low, filled with frustration. "Their tactics, their technology. They're learning from every engagement. We've already lost 3 battle groups to them, and it's only been a few weeks." The Emperor's gaze remained fixed on the holographic display in front of him, showing the vast expanse of human-held territory. It was a slow but steady encroachment. Worlds that had once been firmly in the Empire's grasp were now under siege. The humans weren't just attacking military bases. They were targeting supply lines, communication hubs, and key infrastructure. The Empire's fleet had become disoriented and fractured, unable to respond effectively. "Then we will crush them," the Emperor said, his voice cold. "Send the full might of the fleet. Do not hold back. We will wipe them out in one final strike." But the Admiral hesitated. "Sire, the humans have already shown that they will not surrender. They're willing to die to protect their planet. We cannot treat this as a conventional war." The Emperor's gaze sharpened. "What are you suggesting, Admiral?" Wraith took a deep breath, knowing the gravity of his words. "Perhaps we need to consider a different strategy. These humans, this Earth, are unlike anything we've encountered. If we continue to fight them with the same tactics we've used for millennia, we will lose. Are you suggesting we negotiate with them?" The Emperor's voice was filled with disbelief. "We do not negotiate with inferior species." "I am not suggesting negotiation," Wraith replied. "But we must understand what drives them. We cannot continue to approach them like we do the other worlds we've conquered. We are underestimating their resolve. They will never bend to our will through force alone. We need to find another way to break them." The Emperor scowled, dismissing the Admiral's concerns. "I care not for their resolve. This is an empire built on power, not diplomacy. We will break them, as we have broken countless civilizations before." But even as the Emperor spoke with confidence, doubts began to creep into his mind. Earth had proven to be something different, something far more dangerous than any world he had ever faced. And with every battle, the humans seemed to be growing stronger, smarter, and more relentless. Meanwhile, on Earth, the humans were already preparing for the Empire's next move. They knew that the full might of the Empire's fleet was coming, but they were far from intimidated. Every victory, no matter how small, had only fueled their determination. They had something the Empire didn't: unity. For years, Earth had been fractured. The nations of the world had fought against each other, divided by ideologies, resources, and petty disputes. But now, faced with a common enemy, humanity had come together in a way they never had before. The differences between them seemed insignificant when compared to the fight for their planet's survival. It was this unity that made the humans so formidable. The Galactic Empire had always relied on fear and control to maintain order, but Earth's strength came from its people's unwavering belief in their right to exist, and that belief was what would ultimately defeat the Empire. As the human forces prepared for the upcoming conflict, they knew that the stakes had never been higher. The Empire's final assault was coming, and the fate of their planet rested on their shoulders. But no matter how overwhelming the odds, the humans would fight, and they would fight with everything they had. The time for hesitation had passed. The humans were no longer just defending their planet. They were preparing to take the fight to the Empire, to send a message to the entire galaxy that Earth would never bow down. And they were willing to pay any price to ensure that message was heard. In the darkness of space, a new chapter in the war was about to begin. The Galactic Empire had underestimated humanity's strength, and now they would pay the price. The battle for Earth's future. The Galactic Empire's full-scale invasion of Earth was imminent. Every major fleet was being assembled, its armada ready to descend upon the human homeworld. The Emperor was confident, perhaps too confident, that this final strike would bring Earth to its knees. He underestimated the one thing that had made Earth's resistance so powerful, the human will to survive. As the fleet prepared for its journey, human leaders were already making their final preparations. Earth's defense forces were united like never before, and the atmosphere was tense, but filled with an unshakable resolve. The time for diplomacy, for subtlety, had passed. This was to be a battle of survival. On the ground, military leaders from all over Earth met in secret war rooms. These were the final moments before the storm. Leaders who had once been at odds, leaders of nations, races, and ideologies, were now standing side by side. It was humanity's last stand, and they knew it. But the humans had one thing that the Empire didn't understand. They fought not only for their planet, but for every single soul it called it home. The Empire's first wave of attack was devastating. The skies over Earth were filled with fire as the Empire's ships descended, bombarding cities with ruthless precision. However, the humans were ready. The resistance didn't simply retreat to hiding spots. They fought back with everything they had. In space, Earth's ships engaged in brutal dogfights with the Empire's massive fleet. Earth's ships, though smaller and less advanced, had been modified with years of scrap technology, making them unpredictable and dangerous. While the Empire's ships had speed and firepower, Earth's forces relied on guerrilla tactics, using the environment to their advantage. Every time the Empire thought they had the humans cornered, the humans used their ingenuity to slip away, always leaving the Empire's fleet frustrated and in disarray. The battle on the ground was just as intense. The Empire's ground forces, advanced, ruthless, and well-equipped, were met with fierce human resistance. Cities burned, and entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble. But despite the destruction, humanity stood firm. They were fighting for more than just land. They were fighting for their future. The Empire's soldiers had no idea what they were up against. They thought they had seen everything. Planets that had surrendered without firing a single shot, civilizations that had folded at the mere sight of Imperial warships. But Earth was different. The humans fought back with a fierceness that they had never encountered before. The Emperor watched the chaos unfold from his command center. For the first time since the war began, he felt doubt creeping into his mind. His soldiers were faltering. His fleets were being torn apart by guerrilla tactics and relentless human resistance. And in the shadows, something even more terrifying was brewing. The humans had developed a weapon of their own. On Earth's surface, human scientists had worked tirelessly, creating a weapon that could turn the tide of war. They had reverse-engineered what little they had captured from the Empire's technology. With each passing day, they made new breakthroughs, sometimes small, sometimes monumental. And now they had a weapon powerful enough to challenge the Empire's dominance. But the weapon wasn't just a piece of technology. It was the culmination of human determination, ingenuity, and unity. It was their last card to play. The weapon, codenamed the Phoenix, was ready. It was a strange, mysterious creation, something that the Empire had never seen before. Some believed it was a fusion of human technology with the remnants of alien artifacts the humans had scavenged from their battles. Others believed it was an entirely new form of weaponry that combined Earth's most advanced theories with uncharted science. But whatever it was, the humans knew that if they could use it properly, it would change everything. The Phoenix was activated as the battle raged on. The moment it was fired, a shockwave of energy pulsed through the atmosphere. It wasn't just a blast of destructive power. It was something that disrupted the very fabric of the Imperial fleet's communication systems. For the first time, the Empire's ships began to malfunction, their systems shutting down as they tried to respond to the attack. The Empire's fleet was thrown into complete disarray. The once impressive warships, which had been designed to strike fear into the hearts of lesser species, were now blind and vulnerable. The humans had not only fought back with their weapons, they had also found a way to turn the Empire's technological superiority against them. As the Phoenix's energy pulsed through the battlefield, the Empire's ships began to drift aimlessly, their once coordinated forces now scattered and vulnerable. For the first time, the human forces gained the upper hand, but there was no time to waste. The humans knew that this was their moment. The Empire was on the verge of defeat, but they had to act quickly. The Emperor, watching from his command center, felt a growing sense of panic. His fleet was in chaos, and the humans were pressing the attack with an intensity that was impossible to ignore. He had underestimated them. He had believed that the Empire's might could crush Earth's resistance with ease, but the humans had shown him that they were not just a species to be conquered, they were a species to be reckoned with. And as the Phoenix continued to pulse its energy, the Emperor realized something terrifying. He had made the biggest mistake of his life. The humans were no longer the underdogs. They were the ones in control. And it was too late to stop them. The battle for Earth's future had reached a turning point. The Galactic Empire had underestimated humanity, and now they would pay the price. But as the humans pressed their advantage, they knew that this victory would come at a cost. The war was far from over. The Empire was still powerful, and the final struggle was yet to come. But one thing was certain: humanity had proven its strength, its resolve, and its ability to fight back against the might of the Empire. And the Galactic Council would soon learn the true cost of underestimating Earth's potential. The Empire strikes back. The Empire's once unshakable confidence was now a distant memory. The battle for Earth was far from over, and the Galactic Council had made one crucial decision. They would send their most fearsome weapon to put an end to humanity's defiance. This weapon, a massive fleet of warships known as the Dominion, was the Empire's ultimate deterrent. With unmatched firepower and advanced technology, the Dominion was designed to crush any rebellion in the galaxy. And now it was heading toward Earth with a singular mission: annihilation. The human forces knew what was coming. They had seen the devastation caused by the Empire's earlier attacks, but the Dominion was something far more terrifying. Earth's military leaders gathered in their secret war rooms, watching the massive ships on their screens as they approached Earth's orbit. Time was running out. Humanity's forces had fought valiantly, and the Phoenix had given them a brief but powerful advantage. But they knew that this new threat could wipe out their planet in a matter of hours. It was clear now. This wasn't just a war of survival anymore. This was the final battle for Earth's future. On Earth's surface, the once vibrant cities were now battle zones, scared by the Empire's bombardments. But the human spirit was unbroken. The resistance fighters, who had once been civilians with no military training, were now hardened warriors. The battle had transformed them into something more than just survivors. They were defenders of their world. In the skies above Earth, a small fleet of human ships readied themselves for the coming fight. The human ships, though far smaller and less advanced than the Empire's warships, had been upgraded with every possible piece of technology they could get their hands on. They were a patchwork of scrap metal and salvaged weaponry, but they were fast, agile, and unpredictable, just like their creators. And then, in the distance, the Dominion appeared, an enormous fleet that blotted out the stars. The sheer size and firepower of the Dominion struck fear into the hearts of every human fighter. There were hundreds of ships in the fleet, each one bristling with weapons powerful enough to wipe out entire cities with a single shot. But humanity had one thing that the Empire did not. They had the will to fight. As the Dominion began to descend upon Earth, the human fleet launched its counterattack. The battle was unlike anything Earth had ever experienced before. The sky was filled with streaks of light as explosions rocked the atmosphere, and the air was thick with the sound of battle. But amidst the chaos, humanity's fighters held their ground. The Dominion ships unleashed wave after wave of devastating firepower, tearing through human ships and cities alike. But the humans didn't retreat. Instead, they pressed on, using their advanced tactics to strike at the heart of the Dominion ships. It was a battle of tactics and ingenuity versus raw power. In the midst of the battle, a human pilot named Captain Emilia Torres led a small squadron of ships on a daring mission to infiltrate the Dominion's flagship, the Imperius. The Imperius was the largest and most heavily guarded ship in the Dominion fleet, and if the humans could destroy it, the rest of the fleet would collapse. Torres' squadron engaged in a high-speed chase through the heart of the Dominion fleet, dodging enemy fire and narrowly avoiding destruction. Torres' ship was damaged, but she and her crew pressed on, determined to complete their mission. They used the cover of the battle to approach the Imperius undetected, weaving through the wreckage of fallen ships. The plan was risky, almost suicidal, but the humans had no choice. They had to hit the heart of the Empire's fleet if they wanted any hope of survival. Inside the Imperius, the Empire's top commanders were watching the battle unfold. They had no idea that a small group of human fighters was making its way toward their flagship. The human resistance had proven difficult to defeat, but they still believed that their fleet could crush the human forces in one decisive blow. Then, as the human squadron approached the Imperius, Captain Torres made the call. Her ship's engines flared to life, and she led the charge straight into the heart of the flagship. The humans fought their way through the Dominion's defenses, using every trick in their arsenal to outmaneuver the Imperial soldiers. The enemy was disoriented by their unorthodox tactics, and the human forces gained ground. Torres and her team reached the control room of the Imperius. It was a race against time. They planted explosives in critical systems, ensuring that even if they couldn't escape, the Imperius would be destroyed. As they made their way back to their ships, the countdown began. The explosion was deafening. The Imperius was obliterated in a massive burst of energy. The shockwave rippled through the Dominion fleet, causing panic and confusion among the Empire's forces. The flagship, the symbol of the Empire's dominance, was gone. And with it, the morale of the Dominion fleet shattered. But the fight was far from over. The Dominion was still vast, and the Empire's forces were regrouping. The human forces, though victorious in this skirmish, were exhausted and battered. Yet in this moment, they had proven something to the Empire. Humanity was not to be underestimated. As the battle continued to rage, it was clear that the Dominion's path to Earth was not so easily assured. The humans had struck a blow to the Empire's pride, and the Galactic Council was beginning to realize that their underestimation of humanity might cost them everything. The Empire had underestimated Earth before. Now, they would learn the hard way that humanity was not simply fighting for its survival. They were fighting for their very future. And no matter the odds, they would never give up. The turning tide. The final moments of the battle were upon Earth. The Dominion fleet, severely weakened after the destruction of the Imperius, was in chaos. The remaining warships scrambled to regroup, but their morale had been shattered. The human forces, though battered and exhausted, were relentless. They had pushed the Empire to its limits, and now they were closing in for the final strike. The Galactic Council, watching from their distant citadels, had received urgent reports from their generals. The humans had not only survived, they had turned the tide. The once seemingly invincible empire was faltering. The destruction of the Imperius had been a symbol of the Empire's vulnerability, and humanity had proven that they were not the helpless species the Galactic Council had dismissed. In the wake of their victory, the human forces gathered for one final assault. The remaining Dominion ships were far from defeated, but their leaders now knew that victory was slipping from their grasp. Their superior technology, their vast numbers, they had all proven to be nothing against the resilience of humanity. The Empire had underestimated the humans' determination, their ability to adapt, and their refusal to be broken. And now, they would pay the price. Humanity's fleet, despite its rough and makeshift appearance, had proven itself to be a force to be reckoned with. The Empire's weapons were powerful, but human ingenuity and willpower had turned the tide. The remaining human pilots, energized by the destruction of the Imperius, pressed forward with a renewed sense of purpose. They had fought through unimaginable odds to get this far, and they would not stop until Earth was safe. As the battle neared its climax, the human fleet began to surround the remaining Dominion ships. The Empire's forces, scattered and disorganized, were no match for the tactical brilliance of the humans. Every move the Empire made seemed to be anticipated by the humans, who countered with precision and deadly force. The Dominion ships fell one by one, their shields crumpling under the barrage of human fire. In a final, desperate move, the Empire's remaining commanders ordered their ships to make a last stand. But it was too late. The humans, despite being outgunned and outnumbered, fought with an intensity that left the Empire reeling. With one last push, the remaining Dominion ships were destroyed, and the battle was won. The Galactic Council, who had once dismissed humanity as a threat, were now faced with a harsh reality. Earth had not only survived, they had emerged victorious. The price the Empire had paid for underestimating humanity was steep, and the repercussions would be felt throughout the galaxy. In the aftermath of the battle, Earth stood as a beacon of hope and defiance. The human forces had proven that no matter how overwhelming the odds, they would fight to protect their world. The Galactic Council, now painfully aware of humanity's strength, would have to reconsider their stance. Humanity had earned their respect, and perhaps more importantly, their fear. The battle for Earth had ended, but the story of humanity's rise had just begun. Earth had shown the galaxy that they were not just survivors, they were conquerors in their own right. And as the dust settled, the message was clear. Humanity was a force that would not be easily dismissed. The victory was sweet, but it came at a cost. The Empire had fallen, but the war was far from over. The Galactic Council would regroup, and new threats would inevitably emerge. But Earth's victory was a turning point in galactic history. The humans had proven that they could face the might of the Empire and win. As the survivors of the battle celebrated their hard-fought victory, they knew that this was only the beginning. Earth had faced its darkest hour and emerged stronger for it. But the galaxy was vast, and the challenges ahead would be even greater. Still, humanity had one thing that no alien race could match: their unbreakable will. The Galactic Council had learned a valuable lesson that day. They had underestimated Earth, and now they would have to reckon with the consequences. The battle was over, but the war for the galaxy's future had just begun, and humanity was ready for whatever came next.